Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Raphael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Raphael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Zoe, thank you so much for joining me on Coaching Call. How are you today?
I am very well, thank you. Thank you for having me in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to talk to you. You are doing so many amazing things with your life, but let's go back to when you were a child, right? Before the age of 10, where'd you grow up? And the other question that comes to mind, who were your biggest influencers, even before the age of 10?
Oh, right back to the age of 10. Okay, so I grew up in Bristol, in England, in the UK. So England is kind of between London and Wales, for those who don't know. It's a pretty big city. And I grew up, was born and bred. Still live here now, so still live in Bristol. Grew up with my parents and a younger sister. And yeah, I had a fairly normal upbringing. Grew up all together. My dad was a police officer. My mum was at home, and got on really well with my sister. No dramas, and we still get on very well now. So I guess in terms of influences at that early age, I think probably my dad at the earliest stage, and in terms of a career that I wanted. So my dad was a police officer, would always talk about his work and the excitement of his work, and I think that definitely appealed. And I knew quite early on that was what I wanted to do. So I think that was an influence. And I think other than that, kind of sports teachers and coaches. Both my sister and I were very sporty, especially going into our teens as well. So we spent quite a lot of time traveling to and from sort of sports games and matches and with sports coaches. And I think that's probably where mindset came into things at an early stage. Team sports, team playing, learning to work with other people. I think that all probably came in at that age as well. So no, kind of a fairly usual upbringing, I guess.
Nice. So you said your dad influenced you. And is that the career that you went with?
It's the career I planned, and I did end up working for the police, but not as a police officer. So going into my teens, coming out through the exams, and when we were starting to talk about career choices, I knew that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a police officer, and despite lots of different conversations in school about going to university and all of the other things that I could do, I absolutely had my heart set on it. But I never got through the assessment. I'd failed one of the assessments by 1 mark, and it just wasn't meant to be. However, I did work for the police for 20 years as a civilian, and I got to do lots of roles that have always been done by police officers that are now done by civilians. So although I was never a warranted police officer, I did work for a long time in lots of different roles that were always done by police officers. So I had lots of different operational roles and did work there for 20 years and absolutely loved it. So although I didn't do the exact job I wanted, I did go into that world, and I was able to do a lot of the work that I wanted to do. So very, very grateful for that.
It panned out. In those 20 years, you may have had mentors or people that helped and guided you. Which ones stand out for you? Because I'm sure you've had so many.
Yeah, I think I was very fortunate that when I first went into the police, went in at entry level, and very quickly, I think within a couple of years, went into a supervision role. And I was really fortunate to have a boss at that point who was a fantastic leader, very fair, very firm, very clear, very person-centered, but also very efficient and very effective. And I learned so much from her in those first couple of years of being in a team leader role. And then I think as I worked through the organization and got to work with lots of different leaders, you know, there are very different types of leaders in the police. You've got people that are very, very strong operationally, and then you've also got some amazing people leaders as well. So I was very lucky to be able to work with people who had very different leadership styles and be able to kind of pick out different things from different people. But that first boss that I had, you know, we stayed in contact. I would say she mentored me throughout those 20 years, and I'm still in contact with her, and I still reach out to her now when I want some advice or some support. So she's gone from boss to mentor to very good friend. So still, you know, I'm very lucky to have her in my corner, if you like, to be able to seek out that support and guidance when I need it. And I think now also, you know, we do the same for each other. It's a very equal role now. So yeah, it's great to be able to have that.
That is something very interesting that you just brought up, that she was your mentor up here and you were always looking for guidance, but out it's kind of balanced itself out. So do you find that every so often when she asks you for your help, you're like, whoa, this is kind of cool, right?
Yeah, it's really nice that like over the years, I mean, it's probably getting on for nearly 30 years now, which is a scary thought, but you know, over the years, how that's evolved and how it's shaped. And, you know, I think it's nice to know that she respects and values my opinion and my perspective as much as I've always valued that from her. So yeah, it's nice. It's always nice when you think the people who you've looked up to and learned so much from still feel that they can learn from you as well. So yeah, it's great.
That's a great mentor, because if you think about somebody who is at a high level, but they're open and willing to even listen to someone who's at a lower level and even learn from them, that just goes to show that it is a great mentor, because a lot of people don't do that.
I think it's also what made her a really good leader was that she was, you know, that acceptance that she didn't always know more than everybody else or didn't always have the answers, and being able to almost put that ego bit aside to open up that discussion to hear from other people and be, you know, consider those other perspectives from other people, I think was what made her a really good leader, and also what probably kind of made me gravitate towards wanting to learn from somebody like that, because I think it takes, you know, it does take a certain characteristic to be able to say, actually, I don't have all of the answers, and also that people who might be in that sort of less senior position might actually know more, and that we can learn from them as well. But I mean, it's something I say all the time to people, you know, and I work a lot with young people now, but I learn as much from young people as they're looking to learn from me. I think we're all a work in progress, and I think we can all learn from other people because everybody has different experiences and everybody has something to offer regardless of seniority or experience. So it's definitely something that I learned from her, and definitely something that I remind myself of now, that no, I don't have all the answers, I don't know all of the information, and even if I did, I still don't have all of the different perspectives. So it's always good to listen and learn from other people as well.
Right. So that's a great insight on your part. So being that you learned from such a great leader, would you say that that's the kind of leader that you became as well?
I'd like to think so. I would love to think that people, you know, reflect on the way that I've led and managed like that. And I think, you know, it's interesting for me now because I work a lot with leaders and managers in that coaching and training environment. And it's always interesting that as I'm talking through different scenarios or different frameworks or different models, to reflect back on those years when I was in those roles, to think, did I do it like this? And I think there's that, sometimes there is a disconnect, isn't there, between how we think we're showing up and how we think we're leading to how it feels for those people who are within our teams. So I think I'd like to think I did. I certainly could. I can hand on my heart say that I did the best I could, and I think I had that awareness of, you know, wanting to learn, wanting to grow, wanting to evolve, wanting to always improve. And I think that then, I think the awareness definitely helps with that, because I think if you have that awareness, then you're always looking for that feedback. You're looking for opportunities to be better and to improve. So I would like to think I have. I am always open to feedback for other people to say otherwise. I mean, you can't please people all of the time, but I think I would like to think that people would say that I was fair, that I was very clear, that I was, you know, treated the team well. That's for other people to answer, maybe.
Yes, absolutely, because we can do our best, right? It's up to them to take the lessons and everything that we're sharing with them. And also it's perceived, right? How do people perceive what you're sharing with them? Because some people go, oh, that's not what I want, or maybe that's exactly what I want, right?
Absolutely. And these are conversations that I have with leaders and managers now, is that we have to show up in different ways for different people, because what one individual needs might be the opposite to what somebody else needs. And I think one of the best questions to ask as a leader or as a manager, and even in personal lives as a partner or as a parent, you're asking that question: what do you need from me? What can I do that would make me a good manager or partner or parent to you? Because in the same way that if you're a parent with more than one child, you might need to parent those children very differently. It's exactly the same in leadership. You might need to lead your people in different ways, and in coaching in a team sporting environment, your players, your people are going to need something different from you to get the best out of them. So I think it's great to ask that question rather than assume that you think you know what people need. And I think sometimes that's the biggest downfall for a lot of people, is that they assume that they know what people want, and actually that's not always what people are looking for.
Yeah, I think that that's a great leadership skill, to find out what they actually need, instead of assuming, because we know what that word does for people, right? So if you consider, one of the things that you kind of touched upon a second ago is the imbalance. And actually, I did a show this morning on imbalance in our lives. And I told people, ask 3 questions. This is the 3 questions. Am I sleeping enough? Am I replenishing this incredible body of mine? Right? That's one imbalance. And then the other one, am I nourishing it properly? Am I feeding this incredible body of mine? And the third question, which is probably the question that a lot of people forget to ask, or some people are constantly asking, is, am I safe? Am I living in a safe environment? Is my workspace a safe place? Do I feel comfortable even? Going home, am I safe? So there's so many different aspects to, am I safe? Am I safe in my relationship? Am I safe in the environment I live in, the environment I'm going to? So there's so many aspects with the imbalance. But I think those are the 3 main questions that we have to ask. Even as a leader, do you feel safe even asking the question? Right? What's the repercussion that can come if you even raise your hand? Because people are going to like notice you, and they're like, oh no, am I safe asking the question? Right?
Yeah. And I think it's really important to consider that. I mean, we hear people talking about psychological safety in the workplace, of creating that safe space for people to say that they're not okay, or say what they need support with. And I think quite often people consider that from the perspective of the teams of individuals. You're absolutely right. It's from, the managers also need to feel that psychological safety, and also the sociological safety of that group in a group context. That's really important as well, to be able to ask those questions, but also to be able to hear the answers as well.
Yes. So you've had a little bit of imbalance in your life. Do you mind sharing? And at what age did you have the imbalance, and what did you do to rectify it?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think at the time, I think it's very easy when you're in it. I think one of my favorite expressions is you can't see the label from inside the jar. And I think recognizing what it was to when you're in it and recognizing what it is can be two very different things. I mean, I think for me, my early 20s, was a challenging period for me. I wasn't living the way I wanted to live. I wasn't in a relationship I wanted to be in. It wasn't a healthy relationship for me. I was doing my best to work full time and be a parent and raise a very young child at that point. And, I wasn't living well. Those three questions that you asked earlier, I would not have been able to answer those three. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't looking after myself, and I wasn't in that safe environment. So those three were fundamentally, they were needs that were not being met at that time. And so it's one of those situations that you get into them very quickly, and it takes a long time to come out of them, and it also takes some time to rebuild after that as well. I mean, but that's part of the journey that is life as well. I think there's very few people in this world who've gone through life, especially when you get into your 40s, that people that haven't had adversity or they haven't had a challenge that they've overcome. And I think it's always lovely to have those conversations with people who have overcome those adversities but have actually made something positive from them and use them as opportunities to grow and evolve and become better people as a result, rather than holding on to it as that heavy weight around their neck, which we also know can happen. So yeah, the 20s were not a fun time for me, but actually it led to a huge period of growth and some amazing opportunities for me. So I wouldn't necessarily want to delete it out of my life timeline. I think knowing what I know now, I would probably go back and handle things a little bit differently, but I wouldn't delete it off my timeline. It's just one of those things that was an experience for me. It was an uncomfortable experience, but actually led to some incredible experiences that might not have happened had I not been on that path. So I guess, there's different ways of looking at it.
It goes to the old saying, things happen for a reason, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And they're not permanent. It wasn't a lifetime. It was, potentially for a reason, and it was for a season. It hasn't been for a lifetime, but I think it has put me on a path that's shaped where I am now, and that I'm incredibly grateful for. So.
And you talked about opportunities presented themselves, but the whole thing is sometimes we don't see the opportunities. We're blinded, right? And maybe those opportunities were there earlier and you just didn't see them until you were ready to see them.
Yeah.
So what actions did you take within yourself that allowed you to even see the opportunities that were being presented at the time? I go deep, by the way.
No, that's fine. I just, where do I even start to answer the question? I think that's the challenge. And I think, were those opportunities there before? I think they probably were. It's a question that and a conversation that I've had with other people of, do I think I would have ended up doing what I'm doing now, even if that hadn't, if some of those life experiences hadn't have happened? And I don't know. I think I would have always ended up doing this type of work, if I'm being honest, because I think that was always what I felt, I've been drawn towards, so I'm not surprised by that. And other people aren't surprised by that either. But I think in terms of going from where I was to where I am now, and being able to see those opportunities, a lot of it was just I think other than the change of environment and changing the actual logistics of the situation, a lot of it was just taking that time to work on myself. And I think that's the question. Yeah, Phoenix for a company name for me was really important, because if you're going to rebuild, then you get to choose how you rebuild. You get to choose what you keep hold of. You get to choose what you let go of. You get to choose what you strengthen, and you get to choose how you shape that into what happens next. And so that's where the opportunities were for me, was that I could have continued as I was, or I could just say, actually, who is it that I want to be? How do I want to show up in the world? What do I want to do differently? And recreate it.
Yeah, definitely. So that's why it makes sense for your website to be phoenixlifecoach.cu and .co.uk. So if you think about Phoenix, right, rising from the ashes, becoming better than you were, right? So you were at the deepest end, at the bottom, and you rose up. What was life like once you realize the potential to really rise up, to really leave it all behind and move forward?
And a lot of people talk about feeling lighter, don't they? When they talk about that recovery process or the healing process, and when you make decisions to leave certain things in your past and close those chapters down, it feels a lot lighter. But I think for me, there was that definitely was an element to it. But I think the key thing for me was that I recognized that the things that I had tapped into for that survival, if you like, for want of a better word, were also really key strengths that I could use proactively to make myself stronger, to be able to do the things that I wanted to do. And I found that level of resilience and that level of tenacity and persistence and stubbornness, those were the things that had got me through, but they were also the things that helped me pick myself back up and get stronger. And I think I hear other people say it as well, once you realize that you can, that can be quite addictive to a point. When you realize that you can do one thing, you're looking at what the next thing is. And I definitely went through a period of time, and I say now to people, I call them my yes years, where I went through a couple of years of thinking, actually, I'm just going to say yes to things. When the opportunities present themselves, I'm going to say yes, and then I'll worry about how to make it happen afterwards. I'll worry about whether I'm fast enough or strong enough or whatever that is, whatever makes me that little bit nervous. Rather than saying no, I'll say yes and then work out how. And that for me was a game changer, because it meant I was not only seizing the opportunities that were put in front of me, I was making the most of every opportunity that was put in front of me as well. And over that period of years, I ended up getting promoted in work, because different job opportunities would come up. And whereas I would look at it before and think, I'm not ready for that yet, I thought, well, I'll put an application in and let them decide whether or not I'm ready for that yet. That's when I found the sport of strong woman, of putting myself in that situation of signing up for competitions and seeing what happened, and putting myself forward for different classes and different challenges in the gym to see what would happen. There were so many things that happened in that period that actually I didn't know I was capable of all of those things until I put myself in those situations where I tested it. And then that becomes quite addictive. So, well, if I can do that, what else could I do? And I remember somebody saying to me in that time period, it was like, for God's sake, Zoe, just concentrate on one thing. Like, you haven't finished this thing yet, and you're already thinking about what next. And I was like, I don't have a problem with that. That's not a problem for me. I see the way it might be a problem for you, but that is not a problem for me. I want to be looking forward to the next thing. I want to keep challenging myself and keep seeing what's possible, because the possibilities are endless, and I want to see what is possible. So I'm going to keep pushing that barrier. So, and I appreciate that's not for everybody, and different people have got a different bandwidth as to what what that looks like for them. But I think personal growth is really important. So although it might look different for different people, that has been, you know, those years were a game changer for me, and not something that I wanted to let go of, and something that I've probably tempered it a little bit now, but still something that is there.
You made me think of when you said that maybe we let people choose us instead of us raising our hand, right? And you made me think of crayons. Imagine a 12 pack of crayons. Those crayons are going to be used. But what if you go into a 32 pack of crayons? Not all of them. Now you're going to a 64 pack of crayons. Which are the most used crayons in a pack of 64? The red, yellow, the green, the blue, and the black, right? The other ones, not so much. So if you're a different crayon, what do you have to do? You have to, when they pull it out, you kind of have to move over a little bit, right? So if we were crayons, how can we get chosen when we're not the most popular, not the one that they see? We kind of have to raise our hands. We have to say, hey, look at me. I can color your life. I can make your drawing so much better if you only use me. But yeah, you're right. You have to raise your hand. You have to say, you have to fill out the application, because no one is going to say, here you go, fill it out. No,
Yeah.
it's available to everybody, right? So it's up to the individual to say, I believe in me. I am capable. I am worthy of this. You said one word that triggered a thought for me as well. So I am paying attention. You said strong. And I want to talk about that strength, because you have a title, and I want to talk about your title. So would you mind sharing with us?
So there have been others that have held that title since, but for that specific year, I'm holding tightly onto that one. So for me, the strength, you know, we can talk about the mental strength, but for me there was the physical strength element as well, and going into the gym and lifting was really useful for me in changing my mindset. And I know other people that have gone into strength sports have found very similar. And I think also within martial arts as well, I think there are some similarities in terms of the training, the control, following that pattern, following that routine, putting the work in, putting the effort in, and that paying off. But for me, stepping into the gym as part of my, you know, okay, what else can I do? And having a PT that saw the potential that I didn't know I had. You know, I went in just to try and get fitter, try and get healthier. And it was somebody else that said, actually, you know, do you realize how strong you are? You're lifting heavier than other people. And you just don't know, do you? You get caught in your own little world, and you show up and you do your best, and you don't necessarily pay a lot of attention to how that compares to other people. So when the opportunity came up, well, actually it was somebody who I was training with who was interested in strong women. There was a gym in Bristol locally that were doing an open day. She wanted to go down. She asked if I would go with her. It was in my yes years, so I said yes, and I went down with her. And it was cool. It was fun. And then as we were leaving, the gym owner said he was putting on a competition. Would we sign up? So I said yes. At that point, I had just spent 2 hours having an introduction to the sport, and I'm leaving and signing up for a competition that was in 6 weeks' time. You know, it's crazy when you look at it. And so that was the first ever competition. So I was learning the events. I was learning how to lift these different items, and 6 weeks later I'm in my first ever competition. 3 weeks after that, there was another competition locally. They'd had quite a few dropouts due to injury and illness. Somebody messaged me and said, well, you trained for the competition a couple of weeks ago, so you're probably in quite a good condition. Do you fancy doing another competition? So I said yes. And that was when I came back with my first ever trophy. So I think I was 38 at that point. So my first ever trophy. And then things just moved really quickly. I went to a regional competition, qualified for England's, went to England's, qualified for Britain's, went to Britain's and qualified for Europe. So within a 12-month period of kind of having that introduction to the sport, I had the title of second strongest woman in Britain and 8th strongest woman in Europe. So it escalated very, very quickly. It was a very busy 12 months, but it was a 12 months of learning how to fail and pick myself back up again, because that's what strength training is all about. You push yourself to failure, and then that becomes your starting point, and you keep working on it, you know, and being in those situations, being in those competitions, you know, going up against, you know, people that have been doing it for a longer period of time. And it was incredible. It was an incredible experience. And I did it for a little bit longer after that. And then personal circumstances changed and I stepped away from it, but I'm still very much involved in that world. And I am very fortunate that as a company, I sponsor Andrea, who's world's strongest woman. So definitely much more stronger and much capable. But it's great to still be involved in the sport. And I held that title in 2016. I will hold it with pride for a long time. But yeah, there's some great women coming through in the sport, and it's great to see the sport growing as well.
Well, I want to say congratulations
Thank
to you.
you.
That speaks so much volume as far as, and you talked about strength, physical, but it's also mental strength, because you talked about, and you said it beautifully, you need to go to failure in order to succeed. And so many people, they're afraid, they're terrified of failure. It's like, oh no, I'm not going to do it because guess what? I'm going to look silly. I'm going to fail. Oh my God, what are people going to think, right? But to succeed further, the more you fail, the more you fully project yourself forward. People don't fully understand that. That takes mental toughness. It's not just the physicality of it, but it's the endurance that we have in our mind, right? Because that's a different muscle we're working on, if you will, right? It's not one that you can see outside of your brain, right?
No.
You don't see your head getting like this, right? It doesn't. Thank God that doesn't happen. We would all look a little weird, but. That is the one muscle that we can work consistently, day in, day out. But that mental toughness, unfortunately, not everybody has. And I think that what you're doing is you're helping people understand that they have it inside of them, right? And congratulations for even sponsoring the women's, you know, the number one and the strongest woman, if you will. It takes even courage for you to say, you know, I'm no longer in it, but you're amazing. I'm going to sponsor you. I believe in you. I believe in the sport that gave me a different perspective. And we're talking perspectives today, right? A different perspective into how we do things differently. What would you say was your biggest lesson overall if you really had to narrow it down during that time?
So the biggest lesson of all is you've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I tell this story. So I was training at one period of time. I had come away from commercial gyms because they just didn't have the equipment that I needed, and ended up training with an amazing group of guys that was in pretty much an old garage in the middle of nowhere. You know, it wasn't a gym by any means. It was just an old building site, and it's actually been knocked down since. But these guys were great. They hadn't had a female train with them before. I don't think they thought I was going to stick around, because the first night I showed up, they gave me a really hard time. They really pushed me. And I think they thought that was going to be the end of it. I think they thought they'd frightened me off. And when I showed up the following week, I think they were quite surprised to see me. But I loved being in that environment because they pushed me really hard. They had zero expectations or limitations on what they thought I was capable of. But one of the training events that I had training for Brits was the Atlas stone, which is the big cement stones that you quite often see in the photographs and on TV. And it's a tough one to do because it's like a deadlift off the floor. You put it into your lap, and then it's like an explosive power move to roll it up onto your chest. And then from your chest, you then have to lift it onto the platform. But once it's on your chest, it compresses your lungs. So you can't take a breath once it's there. So there's lots of things that you have to remember in a very short period of time, because you can't hang about with this. It's a very quick movement. And if it's on your chest, it starts to move down and it takes the skin with it, and you can't breathe. And it's a great event, but it's a very taxing, certainly on your central nervous system. It's a tough event. And I was practicing for this stone ready for Brits. And I knew at Brits there was a 100-kilo stone, and I was absolutely determined to get this 100-kilo stone. And I will admit, I was being a little bit whiny, and I was being a little bit grumpy because I was finding it really difficult. And one of the guys said to me, you've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. If you are going to do this sport, everything about this sport is putting yourself in a position where you're uncomfortable. And the sooner you get your head around that, the sooner you'll get better, because you need to accept that it's not going to be easy. It's going to come with pain. It's going to hurt, and you're going to push through it. And you'll know that when you push through it, you'll get what you want. And it was said very brutally. There were a lot more expletives in that, because it was just thrown at me. And I was driving home from that training session, and I thought, actually, that is some solid advice for life as much as it is for training. Because when I step outside of my comfort zone, it is uncomfortable, it is awkward, it is difficult, it's not always painful. But if you push through it, the rewards for that are so much better than that discomfort in the moment. And so that was kind of my biggest learning curve, really. And I reflect on that whole period, a lot of it was about being uncomfortable and pushing through it and working out why I needed to be uncomfortable to get to where I wanted to be. And that's what I remind myself all the times now, whenever opportunities come up or I'm in a bit of a sticky situation and I think it's not permanent, you're going to get through it. And when you get through it, you're going to have a few more tools in the toolbox that are going to help you in the future. So I think was some solid advice, not just for training and not just for that period, but for me and life in general.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you did this thing in 2016. You got a title, and you just went to support a friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it changed you, right? It made you become uncomfortable and even accept that. And accept that becoming uncomfortable allows you to level up, allows you to become better than you were yesterday, right? When we met earlier and you asked me how I was, what did I say to you?
Says you're exceptional.
And getting better every day.
Yeah.
Because if I don't believe it myself, I can't say it.
100%.
So it's that mental state that, why am I getting better? And a lot of people go, oh, 1%. I'm like, sometimes it's not 1%. Sometimes it's a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit. And the 1% is like very far off. But it's that tiny little bit that propels me to keep going and doing what I do. And I know that's what it does for you as well. So you decided you're doing this whole thing. And you also were you at the police department, doing all the work at that point? When
Yeah.
did you decide that I'm going to move my career and help people differently?
Mm. It was kind of decided for me. The role that I was in was made redundant, so the decision to leave the police wasn't mine initially. Although once the decision was made, I accepted that quite quickly, and again thought, right, okay, there's an opportunity here. What can I do? And I'd not worked for anybody else. I'd started there at 18. So the thought of working for another organization was just as scary as the thought of starting my own business. So I figured now is as good a time as any. And I took all of the things that I'd been doing with the police. So I'd been coaching, mentoring, and training alongside the management roles that I had. The last couple of years, I'd been working in business change, so with leadership, personal change through coaching, and then business change, organizational change. So it made sense for me to try and bring all of those things together. And again, using the Phoenix analogy of, okay, if I'm going to come out of this and build again, what do I want to keep? What do I want to keep doing? And what am I actually ready to leave behind? So that was 2017. And yeah, never looked back. I mean, things have evolved. I've had different opportunities that have put me on different paths, but yeah, it's been a fantastic 7 years. I've not looked at going back into the workplace. I've not looked at going back into employment. And they say, don't they, once you've been self-employed, that you're very hard to employ because you're so used to doing everything on your own. But I genuinely love what I do. I get to work with some fantastic people. It's, I think, a real honor and privilege to be a part of people's journeys. And when people put their trust to have your support and your guidance, I think that is not something I take lightly. But I've also been able to go into organizations and support with leadership and management development as well. So there's a great opportunity to train and teach and share what I've learned over the years. But then through coaching, it's that role reversal of sitting and listening and asking questions and helping them to work out how they apply that knowledge and make it work for them. And I love both sides of the table, if you like. I enjoy both of that. And yeah, I think being in a position to be able to help people grow. And I think there's I think it's a Maya Angelou quote of, people do the best they can. When they know better, then they do better. And I think that's where coaching and training comes nicely hand in hand, because we can teach people so that they know more, and then we can coach people so that they can do better. And I think that's when people start to see their full potential. And I know that as a sports coach, you'll see that, and other people that will resonate with them, of when you see that moment when people realize that they can, and then when they come back to you and tell you that they have, like, there's something about that is very hard to put into words, but it's a real privilege to be part of. And I love the fact that coaching, it's not you, it's them doing all of the work, it's them achieving all of the successes, but you still feel very much a part of that. And I think it's a real privilege to be able to do that. And so yeah, I absolutely love it. 7 years in, and long may that continue. And hopefully it will continue to evolve and grow, and different opportunities will come up. But if it stays the same for another 7 years, then I'm good with that too.
Right. So when you consider, I love that you started saying yes to things. And that's why you said yes to your friend to go to this event, right? And then you said yes to going into your first competition, and yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. But realize that every time you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to another,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa, right? And how difficult was it for you to, it seems like you were easygoing when they said, hey, your position is no longer going to be available. And you kind of like, okay, let's go. What's next, right? But it had to be scary anyway, So how difficult was it for you to establish yourself as a life coach, to let people know, hey, wait a minute, here's my shingle. Everybody come to my door, knock on my door. I have the right answers for you. I'm here to guide you. I believe that a coach, a really great coach, is more of a guide, right? Because if I'm going to go to a different country and I've never been there, I can look at a map and I can travel to different places, but I don't know the type of food I'll encounter, if there's danger, if there's, venomous snakes in this part of the wilderness, or if there's bears there, unless I do some research. But I would rather have a guide that is going to say, we're going to go this way so we're safe. So we get the best foods, we get the best entertainment. And I think that a coach, to me, a great coach is a great guide, because you said it perfectly said, is that it's not you doing the work, because then you're not longer a coach. A coach guides someone on how they can do the best work and easier, and says to them, listen, this is how I've done it, or this is the scenario that you're going into. What are your choices? How are you going to do it, right? And so that you can present to them the ideas and concepts that will make them choose the right path. So how scary is that for
And it
you?
is choosing the right path for them. I think that's the most important thing. And one of the training courses that I did, one of the coaching courses I did, that the trainer used the terminology guide and explorer. So they said, as the coach, you are the guide, and your coachee is the explorer, and you are helping them to explore their different options and different perspectives. And some people use the term thinking partner. We're here to not give you the answers. We're not here because we know more or know better. We're here to ask questions to help you to think about it differently and to walk around it and explore different perspectives. And I think there's the when you step away from needing to know, or needing to say the right thing, or needing to give the answer that people are looking for, which is not what we do, when you're there to help people to be curious and help people to explore and help people to think about different perspectives, it's a very freeing conversation, because there's no right or wrong answer. It's just talking it through. And I think people know when they've hit the answer that they're looking for, because you see physically they respond to certain things that they're talking about, or their eyes light up, or they start to lean forward. The body tells the answers quite often before the voice tells the answer. And people that I've worked with have always say, like, how did you know? And I'm like, because you tell me. I can see you trying to lean into it, or you'll lean back because it's something you're leaning back from. And it's fascinating to watch it happen. But we're not here to tell people what to do. We're here to create that safe space for people to talk about it very openly, very freely, and get curious and explore different perspectives. And one of the things that I will do is say, if I know of a model or a framework or something that I think might help you, I will offer that to you. But we're just adding things into the melting pot for you to consider. It's not it might not be an option for you, but it might be something that helps you to think about things differently, or get the ball rolling for something else. So it's great to be able to do that. And when you get into those really deep conversations and coaching conversations, can be really powerful, watching that shift in people's thinking, which suddenly then opens up another kind of set of opportunities or possibilities. It's a very powerful thing to see.
It totally is a powerful thing to see when somebody's aha moment is like,
and
it's because of you. It's because you said, one of the things for me is, anytime I read a book, I'm reading a book, and then I'm like, oh man, that was so cool. Let me go write about it, right? And then the same thing when like if I'm at an event, either I'm a speaker at an event, but if I'm a speaker, like later today, I'm going to be at an event and I'm going to be a speaker. But I want to hear what the other speakers have to say, because
Mhm.
I don't know everything, right? I hope to never know everything, but I do want more knowledge, which that's why I said the brain is so incredible, right? It's the biggest muscle, if you think of it that way, how it can truly expand or contract. Or it contracts when we shut down and we don't allow knowledge to come in. But if we don't use the knowledge, then it's wasted, right? So applied knowledge to me is everything. And
Yeah.
so when I'm looking or listening to a speaker, I'm taking notes. I'm paying attention to them. So anytime, and thank you for coming here and sharing your knowledge with me. And I know we have an audience, but it's really me, you know. So thank you. I'm very selfish in that regard, because for me, every time that I hear someone say something, I'm like, boom, I put it in here. But then
Mhm.
right, and you've given us so many golden nuggets, if you will, with your experience, your life, the way you calculated your even your 20s, and you said, yeah, I wouldn't change it. I would still keep it. It's my timeline.
Mhm.
We do things slightly different, but you know, with every it's it's all those movies that they like Back to the Future, any of those, when you change one thing, it
Yeah.
messes the whole future up, right? Especially with that movie Back to the Future, when he changed one thing, like his parents were disappearing, you know, all these different things. And when we consider our lives, I think there we go through things for a reason. And I do believe that.
Mhm.
There is something about that. We're all given gifts, if you will. So one of the things that I do every morning, I pray. I pray several times, because the reason I pray is for gratitude. Right? Even if you're not religious, you can still pray and say, thank you for my hands, for my lungs, for my ability, for my eyesight, for everything. And I call them gifts, right? Because without these gifts, I couldn't do what I do. I couldn't share. So I say, God, thank you for the gifts you've given me, and thank you for allowing me to share my gifts with others. Because when we can share what we have, I think we live in a life of abundance when we do. It's when we hold on to them and we only keep them for ourselves, right? It's like people who hide money under their mattress.
Mhm.
There's no interest in that. If that actually
Yeah.
depletes, right? So the value gets less. Imagine somebody who put $100 in under their mattress 50 years ago. 50 years ago, $100 was worth a lot
Mhm.
than it is today.
Yeah.
So, what would have happened if they would have bought Apple with $100 back when it started, right? Or IBM or anything. So, when we consider the investments we make in our lives, I think they should be investments that not only for ourselves but to share. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. And it only becomes a gift when you share it, doesn't it?
Mm, it
Not a
truly.
gift unless you're sharing it with other people. So yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
When somebody comes to your site, right, and here's your site again. When somebody comes to your site, what can they expect when they come and come to it?
Well, there's a little bit more about me, although I think we've shared quite a lot of it today. So you can find out a little bit more there. There are a lot of free resources on there. So there's blogs, there's links to YouTube, and different interviews and podcasts and lots of information there. There is also a free download for a values alignment assessment. So I think within a lot of the things that we've talked about today, our core values are really important. So there is a free download there for people who, I think a lot of people probably have a good gut feeling about what their values are. The question is, how clear are you on what your values are? And are you living in alignment with those values? Because for me, when I look back at those most difficult periods of time, so particularly in my 20s, I wasn't living in alignment with my values. They were heavily compromised, and that for me was actually a lot of what was most challenging about that time, was that I just wasn't showing up in a way that was important to me. I wasn't living by my principles or my ethics and values. So, a lot of the work that I do, we often visit values as part of that, because if we can get clear on values and needs and that sense of purpose, we're building from the inside and expanding that out. So there is a free workbook there for anybody who wants to explore that in a little bit more detail. But there's plenty there. Have a little nose around, but there's also a contact me page. So if you've got questions or you can't find what you're looking for, then feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to answer questions and speak to people. So as you probably gathered from this talk, I'm quite happy talking, so I'm more than happy for people to reach out.
Absolutely. And thank you for being here today and sharing and your website and all, and the fact that you have freebies, if you will. One of the things that I want to share with my audience is that if you do go to Chloe's website, I'm sorry, Zoe's website, almost rhymes, I apologize. So Zoe's website, if you go there, don't take the freebies and do nothing with it, right? Because then the most valuable commodity we have is our time. So if you're looking for freebies and you do nothing with it, it actually costs you a lot. It costs you tons. You can never get that time back. So if you grab something from Zoe's website, which is phoenixlifecoach.co.uk, do yourself a favor and use it. And then you have more questions, reach out to, if you need a life coach, who better to talk to than Zoe, right? So Zoe, thank you so much for being here. What parting advice would you give somebody to impact their lives? I know that's a big loaded question.
It is. I'm going to feed off what you've just been saying and say take action. Don't wait until you feel what you think you need to feel. Take action. If there's an opportunity there, say yes and take action. I think a lot of people, they think that they need to feel a certain way, or they're waiting to feel a certain way before they do something. Just do the thing. The feeling comes when you do the thing. So take action. We get one go at this thing called life, and you won't regret taking the action, because even if it's not what you wanted, it might lead to the thing that you do. So take the action. Absolutely.
Beautiful. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, Zoe, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Do me a favor. Don't go away, but everybody, we will see you next time. Have yourself an exceptional day. Take care, everybody.